Honorable Norman Manley, Premier of Jamaica, as he prepared to leave his homeland for the most momentous of all conferences. The failure in practice of the Federation of the West Indies and its dissolution were common knowledge. Now Jamaica went to the conference table confident in her own future as an independent country and determined to bring the date of fulfillment as near as possible. Large numbers of well-wishers turned out to see him leave from Delegates Airport. With him and the other delegates went the hopes of Jamaica and the country's confidence that regardless of party, all would be together in the common cause of independence. The will of the people had been made clear by the referendum. Now their representatives left to implement the decision. So the Premier's aircraft winged away. The destination, London. Mr. Manley and his wife are no strangers to the capital city of the Commonwealth. They have been there at all seasons of the year, but it was a wintry London which greeted them at the airport. The weather wasn't nearly as cold or bad as it might have been, although earlier planes had been diverted on account of fog. Everybody wanted pictures. Pictures of the man who, by his very position as Premier, personifies his country's hopes of independence. When the photographers were satisfied and the world's newspapers had recorded the occasion, Mr. Manley left the airport for the 12-mile journey to the capital itself. Ahead lay the most important few days of his life. The days that would shape the future of his country and bring to reality the hopes of the people he served. Meanwhile, at Delegates Airport, more delegates were leaving Jamaica for the conference. There to see them off was Sir Alexander Bustamante, the leader of the opposition. Sir Alexander was unfortunately unable to attend the opening session, but he was to be there in time for the important discussions which followed. During his absence, the opposition delegates were headed by their deputy leader, Mr. Sangster. Political differences were to play no part in the conference. Although Mr. Manley and Sir Alexander hold divergent views on many subjects, independence was not one of them. In this, the main ideal, all parties were united. Education, Mr. Glasspool, was one of the passengers in the aircraft. He took leave of his family, his friends, and of Sir Alexander. Mr. Glasspool was to play an important part in the discussions and, like all the other delegates, carried a heavy responsibility to plan well for the future. The journey swiftly and safely accomplished, the photographers were out again in full force. As the opening session came nearer, interest all over the world was building up to a climax. 300 years of British colonial rule were approaching their end. Many struggles there had been, many obstacles to overcome. But all were past, and Jamaica, the happy island of the Caribbean, was moving surely forward in unity to the inevitable and transcendent achievement of independence. February the 1st, 1962, a date which school children will be taught to remember for generations to come. It was the day that saw the beginning of a new chapter in Jamaica's 450 years of recorded history. At Lancaster House, where many such conferences have been held in recent years, the delegates began to arrive. The chair was to be taken by Mr. Reginald Maudling, Her Majesty's Secretary of State for the Colonies. 4 representatives of the government, 4 from the opposition, 5 officials and 2 secretaries made up the island contingent. Lancaster House was built in 1825 and was originally called York House after Frederick, Duke of York, second son of George III, for whom it was built. It was presented to the nation by the late Lord Leverhulme for use on such occasions as this and renamed Lancaster House. Much of the decoration was by Sir Charles Barry. Since the war, few of any countries have enjoyed such astonishing advances in the field of economic development. This, coupled with maturity in political life and thought, had made it possible for Jamaica to face independence with confidence. It remained to settle the details, for disagreement now could lead to a further period of waiting. While the delegates assembled, Mr. Maudling, Mr. Manley, and Mr. Sangster posed for press photographers in an anteroom. The first meeting was open to the press and later received full coverage in newspapers throughout the world. The future of Jamaica was the question which the conference would decide. Mr. Maudling made the opening speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me very great pleasure to welcome here this morning to Lancaster House the joint parliamentary delegation from Jamaica, who have come here today to determine a date for the independence of their island and to agree upon a suitable constitution. The first task that will face us in this conference is that of drawing up your new constitution. This is a task which, I am told, usually presents very great difficulties on these occasions, since there are so many conflicting interests to be reconciled. It is a great tribute to the maturity of political life in Jamaica that jointly, gentlemen, you appear to have produced for us a draft independence constitution on which there is already a substantial measure of agreement between the 2 main parties in your legislature who are represented at this table today. I know that this cannot have been easy, and it is surely a very good omen for your future that you have been able in the weeks preceding this conference to iron out so many difficulties for yourselves and to reach such a large measure of agreement. Many people, of course, had hoped that you were going to exercise the political maturity which Jamaica has shown in its parliamentary life upon a wider stage in the Federation of the West Indies in conjunction with your neighbors in the Eastern Caribbean. As you all know so well, however, the Jamaican government last September referred this issue to the electorate in a referendum, and the electorate of Jamaica rejected this possibility. This is a decision which many people in many quarters have regretted. It is, however, as you know, one which the British government feel bound to accept, and we will do what is necessary to implement it when we have obtained the requisite powers from Parliament. If in the course of this conference the joint parliamentary delegation expressed the wish that Jamaica should become a member of the Commonwealth, I can assure you now that the British government will be most happy to sponsor Jamaica's application. The main task, gentlemen, therefore, which face us in the next few days, are to devise the final form of your constitution, to discuss possible arrangements for running the common services which you share with other governments elsewhere in the Caribbean, and finally, to agree the date for your independence. I am hopeful that all these matters are ones on which we can reach swift and amicable agreement, so that before this year is out, the energetic people of Jamaica can emerge as an independent nation on the world stage.
Mr. Manley then spoke.
Mr. Secretary, this Independence Conference marks the beginning of the end of a very long road which started over 300 years ago when one of the happy accidents of naval warfare resulted in the capture of Jamaica from the Spanish crown in 1655. The road ends, Mr. Secretary, at a time when all empires decline, when colonialism has become a word of ugly meaning, when the sun sets round the world chiefly on the flags of free peoples, with whom we hope soon to walk in peace and friendship, when late, but more than ready, we join the great company of the new nations of the world. There is no country in the world not now independent which is more fit to achieve that status than Jamaica now is. Indeed, we have been ready for independence long ago, and no doubt would have achieved it already, but for the fact that as far back as 1949 we committed ourselves to an experimental trial marriage with the other territories of the West Indies, if I may so describe the union in federation now coming to an end. That union, Mr. Secretary, has been terminated by peaceful and democratic means. The process has been, I dare to say, an example to the world of democracy in action. Your government is to be congratulated on the good sense of the decision, which put no obstacle in the way of our holding a referendum to decide whether that federation should endure. Any country that can weld into a harmonious unity the sort of heritage we possess, where people drawn from England and Europe and Africa and all the nations of the East are mingled and mixed in every combination that one can conceive, makes a contribution by example to another great problem of the world. That problem, the problem of interracial harmony and respect, Mr. Secretary, I remind you, is now for the first time in your history a living problem for your country. And on your solution of it, much depends for yourself, for my people, and for the Commonwealth and the world. It is because I believe that Jamaica can make a contribution in all these fields that I find it a great moment of pride to come here today surrounded by men from both the great political parties of my country, jointly with them and with you, to determine the questions which this conference shall answer, in order that we may pass through the gate at the end of the road to our own independence as a nation.